I shuddered as Evelyn's words echoed through the pristine walls of my supposed new home. In this house, you'll learn to know your place. You're not family. You're just an outsider. My heart sank, but I forced a polite smile. Thank you for having me, I replied, clinging to Jack's arm as he squeezed my hand reassuringly. Evelyn's cold gaze swept over me with contempt before she turned away, barking orders about unpacking. As Jack helped carry our luggage upstairs, a sense of dread crept over me. Later that morning, I found myself alone in the vast kitchen, scrubbing every surface until my hands were raw. Remember, you have the cleaning to finish up before lunch. Evelyn's shrill voice rang out, and I flinched. Yes, Evelyn, I murmured, my shoulders slumping. This was not the warm welcome I'd envisioned. It was a stark contrast from just a year ago when Jack had proposed, his eyes shining with love. I never thought I'd find someone like you, Sophie. Will you marry me? Tears of joy had filled my eyes as I breathlessly accepted, unable to imagine a life without him. We were supposed to start our happily ever after together, but fate had other plans. Jack's job transfer meant moving to his hometown, and Evelyn had insisted we stay with them until we found our own place. At the time, her offer seemed genuine. I'm so glad you're here, Sophie. We're like family already. She had gushed, embracing me warmly. David, Jack's father, had echoed the sentiment. Welcome to your new home. Foolishly, I had believed their welcoming facade, comforted by the idea of having family nearby. But within days of our arrival, the truth unraveled. You call this clean? Do it again, and do it right, Evelyn had sneered, scrutinizing my efforts. When I tried to explain, she cut me off with a glare that chilled me to the bone. As the weeks passed, the abuse escalated, and I found myself drowning in a sea of impossible demands and endless chores. Desperate, I confided in my godmother, Rachel. Aunt Rachel, I don't know what to do anymore, I had sobbed into the phone, my voice trembling. Her firm tone offered solace. Come to me, dear. You don't have to go through this alone. With Rachel's guidance, I began documenting the mistreatment, determined to break free from this nightmare. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. As I lay awake that night, my mind drifted back to happier times before this living hell began. Jack and I had met at a mutual friend's party, and from the moment our eyes locked, I knew he was special. We spent countless nights talking, sharing our dreams and aspirations over cheap wine and greasy pizza. Jack made me feel alive in a way I'd never experienced before. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, he had whispered one evening as we strolled hand in hand through the park. My heart raced, and I could barely form the words. I want that too. A few months later, Jack proposed in that same park, getting down on one knee as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. I never thought I'd find someone like you, Sophie. Will you marry me? Tears of joy streamed down my face as I nodded fervently. Yes! I can't imagine my life without you. We were polar opposites in many ways, but our love transcended any differences. While I was a free-spirited artist, Jack was a driven businessman. Yet we complemented each other perfectly. Little did I know that our blissful union would be shattered by the very people who should have welcomed me with open arms. After the wedding, Jack's company offered him a prestigious promotion, but it required relocating to his hometown. Reluctantly, we agreed, naively believing Evelyn and David's promises of support. We're so excited to have you both here, Evelyn had gushed, pulling me into a suffocating embrace. You're family now. David had nodded enthusiastically, patting Jack on the back. Our little boy is finally settling down. In those early days, Evelyn doted on me, offering to help with meal planning and household chores, but it didn't take long for the mask to slip. This isn't how I do laundry, she'd snap, rewashing entire loads despite my protests. Gradually, her demands escalated, and any attempt to reason with her was met with a torrent of insults and criticism. Useless, just like your mother, she'd hiss, her eyes blazing with contempt. Jack tried to intervene, but Evelyn played the victim, accusing me of disrespecting her in her own home. Slowly, she drove a wedge between us, exploiting Jack's blind devotion to her. Trapped in a cycle of abuse, I began to lose myself, my once vibrant spirit dimming with every cruel remark and impossible task. But Aunt Rachel's phone call reignited the spark within me, reminding me of my strength and worth. With her guidance, I started documenting every incident, compiling a dossier of evidence against my tormentor. Evelyn had no idea the gathering storm brewing, oblivious to the tsunami of karma barreling towards her. With Aunt Rachel's support, I felt a renewed sense of determination. She had promised to gather evidence against Evelyn and her shady business practices, but first, I needed to play along and keep up appearances. "You look radiant today, Evelyn," I said with a forced smile as she strutted into the kitchen one morning. She paused, eyeing me suspiciously, before a sickly sweet grin spread across her face. "Why, thank you, dear. I'm so glad you're finally learning." I suppressed a shudder, focusing on the pancake batter I was mixing. Evelyn sidled up beside me, running a perfectly manicured nail along the counter. "You know, Sophie, I had my doubts about you at first," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "But you're shaping up to be a decent daughter-in-law." My grip tightened on the whisk as she continued. "Of course, you'll never truly be part of this family, but at least you're trying." I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a perfectly manicured hand. "Ah, ah, ah! Don't ruin the moment with your incessant chattering." Swallowing hard, I nodded and returned to my task, grateful when she finally sauntered away. Later that day, as I was scrubbing the floors, Evelyn cornered me again. "You missed a spot," she sneered, pointing to an immaculate tile. "Honestly, Sophie, it's like you're not even trying." Before I could protest, she grabbed the bucket of soapy water and upended it over my head. I gasped, sputtering, as the foul-smelling liquid drenched me from head to toe. "Oops, clumsy me," Evelyn laughed, her eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Now you'll have to start all over again." As she sauntered away, I fought back tears, my hands trembling with rage. How dare she treat me this way? I was her family, her daughter-in-law, not some servant to be abused and humiliated. But I knew better than to retaliate. Not yet, at least. Instead, I meticulously documented every incident, compiling a mountain of evidence against the woman who had made my life a living hell. In the evenings, Jack would return from work, oblivious to the daily torture I endured. Evelyn was an expert at putting on her saccharine mask, playing the doting mother and gracious hostess. "How was your day, darling?" she'd coo, kissing Jack's cheek as he entered the kitchen. He'd smile tiredly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Exhausting, but it's all worth it to provide for my family." My heart would clench at his words, knowing that in Evelyn's twisted mind I was nothing more than an outsider, a burden to be tolerated. Still, I clung to the hope that one day Jack would see the truth, the monster lurking beneath his mother's carefully crafted facade. With Aunt Rachel's help, I knew that day would come sooner than Evelyn could ever imagine. The days blurred together in a haze of endless chores and verbal abuse. No matter how hard I tried, Evelyn always found fault with my efforts. "This kitchen is a disgrace," she spat one morning, surveying the immaculate countertops with disdain. "I could eat off these floors, and they'd be cleaner." I bit my tongue, refusing to rise to her bait. Evelyn prowled closer, her perfectly coiffed hair swaying with each step. "Well," she snapped, her eyes narrowing, "don't you have anything to say for yourself?" Stealing my resolve, I met her gaze evenly. "I've cleaned everything as instructed, Evelyn." Her lips curled into a sneer. "You call this clean? Do it again, and do it right." As she turned on her heel and stormed out, I felt the familiar sting of tears pricking my eyes. No matter how meticulously I worked, it was never enough for her. Later that afternoon, Evelyn caught me folding laundry in the living room. "Those creases are atrocious," she tutted, snatching a freshly pressed shirt from my hands. Before I could protest, she grabbed the iron from the board and pressed the scorching metal directly onto the fabric. The acrid stench of burning cotton filled the air as the shirt disintegrated beneath the searing heat. "There?" Evelyn smirked, tossing the ruined garment aside. "No more creases." I stared at the charred remains, my hands trembling with rage and disbelief. How could someone be so cruel, so utterly devoid of compassion? As the weeks dragged on, Evelyn's torment escalated to new heights. She would berate me for hours, finding fault with every aspect of my existence. No task was ever completed to her satisfaction, no effort deemed worthy. "Useless, just like your whore of a mother," she'd hiss, her words cutting deeper than any knife. I longed to scream, to fight back against her relentless onslaught. But I knew any retaliation would only give her more ammunition, more reason to turn Jack against me. So I endured, clinging to the hope that Aunt Rachel's plan would succeed. I documented every vile act ever inflicted upon me, building an ironclad case against the woman who had made my life a waking nightmare. Meanwhile, Evelyn played the part of the devoted matriarch to perfection whenever Jack was around. Her saccharine smile and sickly sweet words were a stark contrast to the venom she spewed the moment his back was turned. "How's my favorite daughter-in-law?" She'd simper, pulling me into a suffocating embrace as Jack entered the room. I'd force a tight-lipped smile, my muscles aching from the strain of maintaining the charade. "Just wonderful, Evelyn. You're too kind." Jack would beam, oblivious to the dark truth lurking beneath the surface. In those moments, I hated him for his blind devotion, his unwavering trust in the monster wearing his mother's skin. But deep down, I knew the fault wasn't his. Evelyn had spent years cultivating her carefully crafted facade, lulling everyone into a false sense of security before revealing her true, twisted nature. I vowed to be the one to tear that facade down, to expose her for the vile, manipulative creature she truly was. With each passing day, my resolve hardened, fueled by the knowledge that justice would soon be served. Evelyn had no idea the storm brewing on the horizon, the tsunami of karma barreling towards her with unstoppable force. Her reign of terror was nearing its end, and I would be the one to deliver the final, devastating blow. As the weeks crawled by, Evelyn's torment showed no signs of relenting. If anything, her cruelty only intensified, fueled by some twisted desire to break me completely. One evening, as I was clearing the dinner dishes, a sudden crash made me jump. I whirled around to find Evelyn standing over a shattered vase, her face contorted with rage. "You stupid, clumsy girl!" she screeched, advancing towards me with balled fists. "Look what you've done!" "I didn't," I stammered, backing away instinctively. Before I could finish, her hand lashed out, striking me across the face with stinging force. I gasped, my cheek burning as tears welled in my eyes. "Don't you dare talk back to me," Evelyn snarled, looming over me like a predator cornering its prey. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I was done being her punching bag, her verbal and physical target. Trembling with equal parts fear and fury, I reached for my phone and dialed the one person I knew I could trust. "Aunt Rachel, I don't know what to do anymore," I choked out between sobs, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a brief pause, then her familiar tone, firm and reassuring. "Come to me, dear. You don't have to go through this alone." Relief washed over me, tempering the rising panic. Aunt Rachel had always been my rock, my guiding light through life's darkest storms. If anyone could help me escape this nightmare, it was her. Evelyn must have sensed the shift in my demeanor, for her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Who are you talking to?" she demanded, snatching the phone from my hand. I flinched, bracing for another blow, but she simply sneered and tossed the phone aside. "No one can save you from me, Sophie. You're mine now, to do with as I please." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to show fear. Not anymore. With Aunt Rachel's help, I would find a way to break free from Evelyn's clutches once and for all. Over the next few days, we formulated a plan. Rachel would use her connections to investigate Evelyn's shady business dealings, gathering evidence of her misdeeds. Meanwhile, I would continue documenting the abuse, building an airtight case against my tormentor. "We'll bring that monster down, Sophie," Rachel vowed, her voice steely with determination. "She'll pay for what she's done to you, I promise." I nodded, my resolve strengthened by her unwavering support. No longer did I feel alone, trapped in a cycle of helplessness and despair. For the first time in months, I dared to hope for a future free from Evelyn's toxic grip. Of course, maintaining the charade around her and Jack grew increasingly difficult. Evelyn seemed to sense my newfound defiance, her taunts and mind games escalating in response. "What's wrong, dear? You look positively miserable," she'd purr, her sickly sweet tone dripping with false concern. I'd force a tight smile, biting back the torrent of rage simmering just beneath the surface. "I'm fine, Evelyn, just tired." Her perfectly manicured nails would trail along my arm, sending involuntary shivers down my spine. "Well, we can't have that, can we? Perhaps you need a little motivation to perk you up." The implied threat was clear, but I refused to cower any longer. Soon, very soon, the tables would turn, and Evelyn would finally get the comeuppance she so richly deserved. Just as Aunt Rachel and I were putting the final pieces of our plan into motion, a bombshell rocked the Benson household. Jack called an urgent family meeting one evening, his face etched with worry. "I have some difficult news," he began, running a hand through his tousled hair. "Our biggest client just pulled out of their contract. They're taking their business elsewhere." David slammed his fist on the table, his eyes wide with panic. "What? That account is half our revenue. How could this happen?" As the two men debated the dire financial implications, Evelyn sat in stony silence, her perfectly painted mask slipping ever so slightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with quiet fury. "It can't be. It must be Sophie's doing." I recoiled as if struck, incredulous at her outrageous accusation. "What are you talking about? I had nothing to do with this." But Evelyn was beyond reason, her eyes blazing with barely contained rage. "Don't play dumb with me, you scheming little witch. You've been plotting against us all along, haven't you?" Jack tried to intervene, ever the peacekeeper. "Mom, that's enough. Sophie wouldn't she?" Evelyn cut him off, rounding on me with bared teeth. "Think about it, Jack. Ever since she wormed her way into our lives, things have gone downhill. This is just the latest in her twisted games." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but she pressed on relentlessly. "She's a cancer, poisoning everything she touches. We have to cut her out before she destroys us completely." David looked shell-shocked, torn between siding with his wife or his only son. Jack, bless his heart, tried valiantly to calm the situation. "Mom, you're not thinking straight. Sophie loves me. She would never intentionally hurt this family." His words only seemed to enrage Evelyn further. With a feral snarl, she lunged towards me, her perfectly manicured nails aimed straight for my eyes. I barely had time to flinch before Jack intervened, restraining his mother with surprising strength. "Enough!" he roared, his usually gentle demeanor replaced by righteous fury. "I won't let you treat my wife this way. Not anymore." For a brief, shining moment, I dared to hope that the blinders had finally fallen from Jack's eyes, that he would see Evelyn for the vile, manipulative creature she truly was. But old habits die hard, and Evelyn was a master of deception. Her expression shifted in an instant, crumpling into one of hurt disbelief as fat crocodile tears spilled down her cheeks. "My own son," she sobbed, pressing a trembling hand to her chest, "defending that snake over his own mother's well-being." Jack faltered, his resolve visibly wavering as the guilt trip took hold. Evelyn seized the opportunity, clinging to him with a desperate, almost feral intensity. "Think about what you're doing, Jackie. Think about your father and me, the people who raised you and loved you unconditionally. Are you really going to throw all that away for her?" And just like that, the spell was recast. I could see the conflicted emotions warring across Jack's face as he instinctively pulled away from my outstretched hand. I need some air," he muttered, stumbling from the room in a daze. As the door slammed behind him, Evelyn turned to face me once more, her expression triumphant and devoid of even an ounce of remorse. "You see what you've done, you wretched girl?" she hissed, advancing on me like a snake poised to strike. "You've turned my own flesh and blood against me. But mark my words, this war is far from over." Her words chilled me to the bone, but I refused to be cowed. Not anymore. Thanks to Aunt Rachel's diligent efforts, the evidence against Evelyn was mounting by the day. Soon she would face the ultimate reckoning, the consequences of her cruelty laid bare for all to see. The game was nearing its end, and this time I would be the victor. In the aftermath of Evelyn's explosive outburst, a tense silence descended over the household. Jack avoided me like the plague, haunted by the seeds of doubt his mother had so expertly planted. Evelyn, for her part, reveled in the discord she had sown. Whenever we crossed paths, she would grace me with a saccharine smile that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Trouble in paradise, dear," she'd simper, trailing a perfectly manicured nail along my cheek. I'd stiffen, biting back the torrent of rage threatening to spill forth. "Not at all, Evelyn. Jack and I are fine." Her laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. "If you say so, Sophie, but we both know the truth, don't we?" The words hung heavy in the air, an unspoken challenge that set my teeth on edge. In the meantime, Aunt Rachel's investigation was bearing fruit. She had uncovered a staggering paper trail of Evelyn's shady dealings, embezzlement, bribery, you name it. The evidence is damning, Sophie, Rachel murmured during one of our clandestine meetings. This should be more than enough to take that monster down for good. Relief washed over me at her words, tempering the growing sense of dread gnawing at my core. Soon, this nightmare would be over. I could finally break free of Evelyn's toxic grasp and start anew with Jack, far away from her poisonous influence. At least, that was the plan, until Evelyn went nuclear. It happened one evening at the dinner table. Jack had been brooding in silence throughout the meal, his brow furrowed with unspoken turmoil. Evelyn, ever the instigator, decided to poke the hornet's nest. "You've been awfully quiet lately, dear," she crooned, spearing a forkful of salad with deliberate precision. "Cat got your tongue?" Jack tensed, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his utensils. "Just leave it, Mom." But Evelyn was relentless, her voice taking on a sickly sweet edge. "Or perhaps you're still stewing over that little episode the other night? You know, when your darling wife tried to destroy this family?" The words hung in the air like a lead weight, and something inside me snapped. I could no longer remain silent in the face of her blatant lies and manipulation. "I spoke to Aunt Rachel," I blurted out, ignoring Jack's startled look, "and she spoke to your biggest client." This whole situation was inevitable. Evelyn's perfectly sculpted mask faltered, her eyes widening in shock and disbelief. "What did you say?" Emboldened, I pressed on recklessly. "Your company has been mismanaged for years, Evelyn. All Aunt Rachel did was point out the problems to your client, problems you conveniently chose to ignore." The air crackled with tension as Evelyn processed my words. Then, like a snake striking, she exploded in a burst of feral rage. "How dare you?" she screeched, launching herself across the table with talons outstretched. "You're ruining everything." Plates and glasses shattered around us, as Jack tried in vain to restrain his mother's frenzied assault. David looked on in stunned silence, utterly paralyzed by the unfolding chaos. In that moment, everything crystallized for Jack. As he met my gaze, terror and heartbreak warring in his eyes, I knew the scales had finally fallen away. His mother's true nature, her vicious cruelty and boundless greed, was laid bare before him, a hideous truth he could no longer ignore. The blinders were off, and the facade had finally crumbled to dust. Evelyn Benson, matriarch and master manipulator, had been exposed, and she had no one to blame but herself. The aftermath of Evelyn's meltdown was nothing short of cataclysmic. As the dust settled and the shattered remnants of our once pristine dining room came into focus, an eerie silence descended. Jack was the first to break it, his voice thick with a potent mix of anguish and barely restrained fury. "Mom, what have you done?" Evelyn, always the master of deflection, immediately shifted into victim mode. "Me?" she wailed, clutching her carefully tousled hair. That snake is the one who's turned you against your own family." But her fragile guise was already crumbling, the cracks in her facade widening with each frantic excuse. David, for his part, seemed to be viewing his wife through new, painfully clear lenses. "Enough, Evelyn," he rumbled, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by a grim resolve I'd never witnessed before. "The jig is up. We know what you've done." Evelyn's perfectly painted mask slipped completely at his words, revealing the snarling beast lurking beneath. "You pathetic old fool," she spat, rounding on her husband with balled fists. "After everything I've sacrificed for this family, this is how you repay me?" A cruel laugh ripped from her throat as she whirled to face me once more. "And you conniving little bitch, you think you've won, don't you? That you can just waltz in and destroy everything I've built?" Jack stepped between us, shielding me from his mother's wrath. "Mom, you've done enough damage. Leave now before I call the police." His words seemed to douse Evelyn's fury in an instant, her expression shifting from outrage to disbelief. "Jackie, you can't mean that. I'm your mother." But Jack was immovable, his jaw set in a hard line as he steeled himself against her manipulations. "Not anymore. The woman I knew is gone, replaced by this monster." Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth, but the words kept pouring from him in an unstoppable torrent. "You've lied, cheated, and abused everyone around you for far too long. Well, no more. I want you out of this house and out of our lives for good." An anguished wail tore from Evelyn's throat as the reality of her situation finally sank in. "No. Please, Jackie, I'll do anything. Just don't." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Jack simply shook his head, his expression a mask of grim determination. I gave you too many chances, Mom. This is the path you chose. As Evelyn dissolved into a pathetic heap of sobs and recriminations, David stepped forward, his face etched with a weariness I'd never seen before. You heard him, Evelyn, he said, his voice laced with defeat. Pack your things, we're done. For a fleeting moment I almost felt sorry for the once formidable woman crumpled at our feet. Almost. But the memories of her cruelty, her vicious torment, were still too raw, the scars too fresh. As David ushered his wife from the room, Jack turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Sophie, I'm so sorry. For everything. I opened my mouth to respond, but he barreled on, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. You were right all along. I was blinded by her lies and manipulation. I should have protected you, stood up for you. Gently I took his hand, feeling the weight of his anguish in the trembling grip. It's okay, Jack. You couldn't have known. But he was already shaking his head, his expression haunted. No excuses. I failed you in the worst way possible. But I promise, from now on, things will be different. As I gazed into the eyes of the man I loved, I saw a renewed sense of purpose burning within their depths. The shackles of Evelyn's toxic influence had finally been shattered, and we were free to start anew. It would be a long road to healing, but we would walk it together, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. Evelyn's reign of terror was over, and in its wake, a new chapter was just beginning to unfold.